The JPA met last week and went over a budget that cut considerably the salary or the hours for the general manager or the, I guess, executive director of the JPA. Has some revised budget information to share, but also wanted the opportunity, since Amador had the same reservations we did, they wanted, Amador and Calaveras wanted to bring the JPA executive to each board to make a presentation about the activities in county, what the mission change was, how they anticipate exercising their authorities in the coming years, and be able to answer all your questions. They are available, Jeannie, I think
August 17th.
August 17th. So with your permission, it would be about a 15-minute presentation. Okay. All right. And then we can
Are they going to be asking for money?
Well, as you recall, the budget last year was something like $12,000. I think this coming year it will be more like 10. But people had wanted a justification and understanding of what they were getting for it, and that would be the purpose of this presentation.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss?
I did not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tryon.
I do not have anything to bring before the board today.
I have Fish and Game Commission with Steve, Child Support, Treasury Oversight, I'll be going to the Calaveras Grape Growers Alliance on Friday. Ms. Boyce?
Just to bring you current on state budget negotiations continue. Depending on who you talk to, the latest word is there's no resolution in sight. They have made some deals behind closed doors that appear to resolve about half of the $19 billion estimated deficit at this time, but they're still trying to figure out how to close the entire gap. The governor yesterday apparently made a statement that he could wait until next year if his requested budget reforms did not occur, and then that in turn sparked some response from the Senate Democrats saying, well, we're not happy about the massive cuts to health and social services. So it appears that people are kind of digging in their heels at the moment, and I think it's a long, hot summer, and budget negotiations are going to continue for a while before we see some resolution. So just bring that to your attention.
Yeah, it made the headlines in this morning's paper. Okay, Mr. Jones.
I'm planning to attend the meeting of the Northern California County Council's group later this week, so I'll be out of the office for a couple of days.
Okay, thank you.
Where's that at, Jim? It's in Siskiyou County, Mount Shasta. Oh, very nice.
Jim, I mean, I don't know about the other board members, but I always get information about the legislative group arm of CSAC wanting us to comment. I've talked to you about it a few times. I just assume you review that, and if you think it's appropriate, we do. I don't want to.
I think they send me the same thing that they've been sending you. They typically ask for the county's position, if the county has one, on a few cases in the appellate court system, and yeah, I always look at those. Okay. I saw one a few days ago.
I did too. So I just wanted to not continue to send them to you. I just wanted to assume that you got the same thing.
You can. They've been. I've asked that they send me a copy of what they send to your committee.
Great. Thank you. All right. Let's take a 5-minute recess, and oh wait, no, excuse me. Let's take a 5-minute recess, please. And then we'll go to item 12. This is going to be a study session. The board can't take any formal action. We can give direction. There will be time for public comment on this, and it has to do with requests for special event fee waiver or reduction, and we will probably be looking at this, as I understand your staff report, in a total concept versus just maybe specifically. It could be an and or.
Well, it's up to you, ultimately.
Hey,
Yeah.
always up to us, George. Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself and just proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. George White, Planning Director, members of the board. This item, as you mentioned, is a direct result of a letter submitted by Lee Shoemake of Top Sport Cycling, requesting a fee waiver or reduction related to a special event permit fee that he submitted for an event that's due to take place on the 31st, this weekend. To provide some context, in the report I provided to you, I talked about how this fee was established originally through the Maximus study, how it was adjusted slightly shortly thereafter. I also provided some information about the kind of work that actually goes into processing an administrative use permit, special event permit of this type, typically. And there are some substantial costs associated with that. Also talked about, in a very brief way, the difference between flat fees and full cost recovery fees. That's something probably the board is familiar with, but I thought it was important to provide that kind of framework. We also did some additional research with other agencies of similar size and location to Calaveras County to determine what sort of fees they charge for similar events, and that matrix is attached to the staff report, and I think indicates that our fees are in line with other agencies' fees. In some cases, there are lower fees, and in some cases significantly higher fees, but we're kind of in the middle range there. And then lastly, I provided the board with 5 options on how to proceed or provide direction to us on this fee waiver request. And as Marita pointed out, some of these kind of go beyond the scope of just this individual fee waiver request and talk about the nature of special events and fees and cost recovery and all of these other things that I've touched upon in this report. Given what we've provided to you, staff can't support the fee waiver or reduction. We believe that substantial work takes place. The flat fees are not intended to recover costs on an individual basis, but on an average basis, and therefore we believe it's justifiable to continue to charge this fee and not reduce this one, and to keep the fee in place for other special events as well. However, we're obviously ready and willing to take whatever direction the board gives us. So at this point, I'm willing to answer any questions or respond to any comments you might have. I believe there is a representative from Top Sport here today, and he may have some comments as well.
Does the board have any questions or comments of Mr. White at this time?
I do.
Yeah.
Morning, George.
Morning.
In the preparation of the staff report, you recap what happened back in December when they applied for this other permit. You very clearly outlined that there were 200 or 300 property owners that had to be notified, and I've expressed before that I had no problem with the we call it cost recovery associated with that particular application. But this renewed application, or it's just another race over the same race course as before, which you remember there are only there's 2 property owners involved, and one of the representatives is here in the room today. I understand completely that there is a need to recover costs, but I'm just really very doubtful that the $2,000 is justified in this particular application. I'm kind of curious about what happened when they applied before. I've heard Mr. Shoemake allude to the fact that they had hoped to have the initial permit for $2,000 apply to maybe 2 or 3 events, and
that's correct. Unfortunately, the permit had already been issued by the time they made that request of us, so we could not go back in time and undo that permit and do another permit, so that's why they are subject to a different fee.
Okay. But you're still given the circumstances that this is a repeat, more or less a repeat of the earlier race that they had, there is a road closure that's involved, but there's no notification per se. And there aren't 300 property owners.
Just to the adjacent property owners, that's it. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And again, I don't think, again, as I said before in my discussion of the difference between flat fees and full cost recovery, flat fees aren't intended to recover the cost in every individual application. It's intended to recover the cost of all of the applications that are received over a period of time. So in this case, as indicated in my report, this particular fee was probably more than what was necessary to cover the actual staff costs for processing that fee. But the previous one, actually the county lost money on that deal. In other words, the costs were greater than the fee actually that supported that. So I think on average we're there. I think our fees are reasonable. I think that's proven by the matrix of fees from other jurisdictions. There is a significant amount of work that goes into all of these administrative use permits, not just from my department, from Public Works and Environmental Health and County Council and the Sheriff's Department. And unless you want to have a discussion about going to an actual cost recovery system, I think we're always going to have this argument about whether the fee's too high or the fee's too low. And again, I'm open to having that discussion, and that is one of the options that I provided to you.
Okay, that concludes my questions at this point.
I have a follow-up on this. When you talk about going to a cost recovery system, I could imagine staying with flat fees on things that are essentially common and similar, but where we have a category that has a wide range. It sometimes averaging it seems disproportionate to, and even having unintended consequences on discouraging worthy projects and events. So are you suggesting that we would have to go to a total cost recovery system, or are you open to a mixed approach based on the category?
I've worked under both systems, actually a hybrid system where some fees were flat and some fees were not, and the dividing line in the system I worked under was whether it was a public hearing item or required board or council approval, and we kind of drew the line there. If it was an administrative permit, it was flat. If it was beyond that, it was a kind of a cost recovery fee. But I have to say, even in that jurisdiction, we ultimately went to cost recovery for everything, because we found a lot of these administrative permits, like these, sometimes have an inordinate amount of cost associated with them. Not every single one, but some of them, and it just skews everything. So I'm open to anything, to tell you the truth. I think we should examine the fees. I think cost recovery is a fair way, if it's done correctly, to assess fees, and it does recover the cost of the county. Right now, for example, there are costs incurred in this administrative use permit process that we don't even try to recover. The sheriff, the county council's office, that's just money that goes out the door. I think the downside to going to cost recovery, and you probably already figured this out, is that in some cases the actual cost will be substantially higher than the flat fee is right now, because it's done on a fully burdened hourly rate for every employee that touches this application.
Do you think we process these things efficiently?
Well, I think we do, and I can only speak for my own department, obviously, but I think we do in our department. We're kind of the caretaker, the gatekeeper for a lot of the other departments that comment on these things. But I think we do try to do them as efficiently and quickly as possible. Can we be more efficient? We probably can always be more efficient, I guess. But I believe that we are.
Thank you.
George, this is the second time this group has come in. Is that correct? And last time you charged the same fixed fee the first time they came in?
That's correct.
And you felt that at that point, because it was the first time, it actually cost more than the $2,000?
That wasn't in the analysis. The fee is set. It's a flat fee. If you come in for an administrative use permit for whether it's 1 or 3 or 5 events, it's going to cost the same, because that's what the fee schedule that was adopted established.
You said after 3 events that then you could do
right. So that's just written into the fee schedule. I'm not sure exactly how that occurred, but for example, the event that's going to occur on the 31st, if they come in 3 successive years for that same event, after that time they will no longer be charged the fee, regardless of whether the event gets larger, whether there's more staff time involved or not. And why that exists, I don't know. It's a very puzzling kind of fee structure to me.
It was carried over from previous practice.
Yeah.
Well, it was also, we wanted to make sure somebody just doesn't come in, does a thing, and leave. It was, the whole purpose was to try and help and encourage those community groups.
Right. So an incentive,
that do
in other words.
events.
Yeah.
And so that's why
Yeah.
the historic, and that's why over the 3, and we just didn't want drive-bys. Your department or Public Works would spend a lot of time.
Right. So anyway, you're correct. After 3 years, if they did the same event 3 years in a row, after the 3 years is over, these permits are processed for free.
Okay. This is the second year for this group, so if they come back next year, then thereafter.
Again, I'd have to go back and look to see if the events are identical, and maybe the representative from Topsport can comment on that. If it's the identical event 3 years in a row, they would only pay for those 3 years, and after that, it would be cost-free.
Okay.
George, we were given in our packet 2 comparisons. I'm taking the one comparison was done by the applicant.
That's correct.
And then yours.
Yeah.
And the only 2 comparisons that are on there, actually there's only one, and that's Amador County. And theirs shows that a permit fee of $625, and that's through Public Works. Yours show that you need to pay planning. It has to go through planning, and that's a $903 fee. The Public Works at $625.
Right.
And then environmental health, it has to be cleared, and they charge $192. So the total for Amador County is $1,720.
That's what we found out. That's correct.
And our fee of $2,000 covers all 3 of those departments. Is that
does,
correct?
yes.
So the
That's
planning is in charge, and they
Right. We
cover-
collect a fee on
collect a
behalf
fee.
of Environmental Health and Public Works, yes.
Okay. That's the only question I had.
Russ?
Well, this is kind of going back to this fee recovery or cost recovery thing, but looking specifically at environmental health and the on-site septic fee that is included in our $2,000 fee. We have $178.77 for a total of $255. With the full burden rate, call it $50 an hour. That's 5 hours to have maybe Brian can come up and address this. I'm just trying to figure out if we're being penny wise and pound foolish of extracting these fees
Sure.
from people.
Well, and I understand the comment. I think the problem is that when Maximus did their fee study, they essentially did an estimate for a typical application, and they assessed a flat fee for that typical application. In other words, the average application. How they came about doing that, I mean, we could go back and look in those records, and we could provide those to you. There's usually a methodology there that all these fee companies use. It doesn't mean that in any individual case that those costs will actually be recovered. It could be at a lower rate, it could be at a higher rate. The only way to know what a cost really is for any application is to have a cost recovery system where you, in a very detailed way, account for every hour of every person that touches the application, all the material costs, all the postage, all of the noticing. And then you'll have a true representation of what the cost to the county was.
Okay, could Brian come forward and Brian, you were involved in reviewing the application that was submitted
That's
back
correct.
in December. Did someone in your office spend 5 hours analyzing this?
No, what you're seeing there is direct reflection of the weighted hourly rate. The on-site wastewater weighted rate is $77 an hour, and you're looking at the 178 is 2 hours in environmental health. They're different weighted rates for the different departments based on staff. So essentially what this is, the cost that you're seeing here is the time for review. It's a minimal review for on-site wastewater and more of a review for environmental health because of the portable toilets and inspections and that kind of thing. So simply what we're looking at is 2 hours in environmental health, 1 hour in on-site wastewater. It's 3 hours altogether between the two departments.
Okay, can you elaborate on what the on-site sewage, what would be their involvement in an application like this?
On-site wastewater would be looking at, again, in tandem with environmental health, what's the waste disposal capacities? Are we going to be doing any kind of review? In this case, for this bicycle race, quite frankly, this would be a no comment from the on-site wastewater department. But in other instances, for other applications for administrative use permits, on-site wastewater would have additional comments and additional requirements. So again, this is the average, the time where the application comes down to the department, the engineer sits down, reviews the application, makes, in this case, it would be a no comment, goes back to the front office, goes back up to planning. So all this is, you're looking at the $77 is, quite frankly, a quick review and a paperwork shuffle back up to the planning department saying, in this case, on-site wastewater doesn't have any comments. But it is part of the administrative use permit review, just like it would be a conditional use permit review. So any kind of land use, it comes through the agency.
Okay, so if you check the box that say we have no comments, and that gets associated with a $77 bill.
In this case, it's, again, the time for it comes down, goes to the engineer, he reviews the project, he checks the box, goes to the front office, goes back upstairs. That is correct. Now, unlike environmental health, where my staff person is going to be spending generally more than even 2 hours, quite frankly, because he's going to be working with, how many participants do we have, therefore going to the plumbing code, how many portable toilets do we have, where are those going to be stationed, which ones have to be handicapped, how many do you have to have the handicapped, how many have to have wash stations in them, and the like. So there's a little bit more to it than you need 3 portable toilets as an example. So that's where, and that, again, that's where those hours are.
Well, talking about that analysis, it seems like to me that we conceivably could be proactive in that. I mean, if you do that analysis for Mr. Shoemake's race back in December, I mean, he's going to do the same race, and other people. What strikes me is that we ought to systematize this a little bit, so that if you have an event that's 300 people, that all that calculation would be done, and you just ask the question, how many people are going to be here, and you reach and you hand them that sheet that these are your requirements. So
actually, that's a really great point. It's something, as a matter of fact, that as a land use group that we meet every couple of weeks, and that's Public Works, Environmental Health, Building, and of course, like I said, environmental health, planning. Yes, thank you, planning. And as a matter of fact, I passed out a paper at one of our meetings not too long ago stating these are the requirements for administrative use permits. This is what we're looking for from environmental health. So that information can be passed out at the planning department, at the public works department, the building department. And so I guess what I'm trying to answer that with is saying we're trying to streamline that between our 4 departments for that very reason, so that when somebody walks in the door, they know exactly what they have to do, so there's no confusion, so that we're not overlapping as well. So bottom line is we are looking at becoming more efficient in that.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, I mean, it goes back to what George said. I mean, the board approved a flat fee system. If we want to modify that responsibility rests with this board. So maybe the first year it took more time than it does the second time, everything being the same. But it's this board who made the decision on it being a flat fee. So if we want to make changes, that's planning department has given us some alternatives.
Exactly. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the?
Good morning, Jim Macedo from the Sheriff's Office. I just want to briefly describe to you what occurs when we receive a package from the Planning Department regarding bicycle races. And I'm going to speak about bicycle races in general. I realize this is about top sport, but I think it'll help you understand how it impacts us. When we receive the application, we briefly look over the application. We look first at the location where it's going to occur, and if that's going to impact emergency traffic, ingress and egress. On events such as bicycle races, they are prone to having bicycle accidents with injuries, so we will often dedicate an ambulance to the event or try to dedicate an ambulance to the event. That involves some manipulation with staging the ambulances throughout the county, which is done by our dispatch center. Again, I'm speaking in general about bicycle races. We do get and receive numerous complaints about these bicycle races as far as restricting traffic flow, trespassing, urinating in public, trespassing to use the restroom, leaving paint or equipment cones on the roadway or on private property. So all those issues need to be addressed. Most of those are addressed in a letter that goes out to the event promoter, and we ask them to comply with that. Not all event promoters comply with those requests. And it's also, I think, important to note that some of these event promoters will tell you what they plan on doing. However, once the event starts, there's too many people involved, and they're not able to control the event, so people kind of take it upon themselves to not use the portable restrooms or to not clean up the mess when they are done, and ultimately we end up getting a call. So to be very brief, we also support Mr. White's opposition of waiving fees. There is an impact to the county, there is an impact to the sheriff's office, and perhaps later on we'll have a larger discussion about administrative use permits in general and how those impact us in a variety of ways. But we are not in support of waiving the fee for these events.
Does your department get any reimbursement on, because we have lots of events now that are just $100 or no fee?
Correct, we do not. And we usually try and respond to the planning department with a with a letter, and that letter does involve some research that's done by our dispatch center, our records staff. It does take some staff time for them to do the research and then for me to put the letter together and submit it. Sometimes it takes follow-up calls from me, calling the event promoter, asking specific questions. So it just depends.
Okay, thank you, Captain. Steve.
I noticed in our briefing packet here that some time was spent in county counsel's office reviewing this. How often does that happen with administrative use permits? I know this is on a reimbursed time, but is this a frequent exchange?
Janice Elliott, County Counsel's office. They all come through my office. They come to me for review, primarily for the indemnity agreement and the insurance. So the ones that cause more time are the ones where it's not a separate legal entity like a corporation. So I have to determine exactly who can enter into an indemnity agreement. I have to make sure for corporations that they're authorized to do business with the Secretary of State. And I have to look at the insurance also. I have it pretty streamlined. I do most of it online, and I have everything bookmarked. But this one was a little bit unusual since there was not the insurance was being provided by somebody that was not on the application or on the indemnity agreement. So I had probably a series of emails with the planning department before we got that straightened out. But we don't get reimbursed for that time either.
All right. And just parenthetically, last I checked, your department was having furlough days to make up for budget shortfalls. Is that correct?
We are getting furloughed 2 days a month, too. And I would also suggest if the board's going to review this, that this would be the appropriate time to review our indemnity agreement ordinance, because as you'll see a note in there that these types of one-time only events are better covered by insurance than an indemnity agreement. Mm-hmm. And when we adopted that ordinance, we did say we'd come back at a later date to tweak it to fit things. There's a few other applications that probably don't need to have an indemnity agreement also.
All right, that's good advice. Hopefully we'll take it.
Oh, did you have a question?
No.
Janice, when Feeney Park has Mr. Froggy's ride, is that covered by Feeney Park's insurance, or is there a separate agreement for that event?
I've never seen an application for that I recall, so I don't know if they're even applying. Probably not. We have that happen quite often, too, that people don't apply at all.
Oh, well.
So I can't answer that
Whose
question.
district is that in?
Could you make a note?
Calm
George?
thyself, board, it's well taken care of.
I mean, that's just an event. I mean, Feeney Park has been around for years, and I know they have insurance, and they have a bike event. I think they've had 2.
I would assume based on their level of organization that they have themselves covered.
Okay.
And if we're not issuing a permit for them, then that we would probably not be a rider on that particular policy.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I'd like to open it. Yes, Mr. Spellman, please come up.
Darren Spellman. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. George White for his patience and his insight on advising the board on these issues, and also at the same time his willingness to be flexible to follow the board's counsel and direction on how they see fit for this. One thing that I could get from listening to what he said, he mentioned several times, although usually indirectly, that it seems to be his opinion that the best process would be for us to go to a cost analysis. I think was the word he used, or total cost recovery.
Flat. Actual
Yeah.
versus flat.
Right.
It's cost recovery.
Right. And what he did say was that, the initial fee that was paid probably didn't cover the administrative costs for the original event. So the fee that would be charged this time, though it probably not as much work done this time as the first time, kind of help even those out based on the flat fee structure. So it seems like at some point we'd want to go to that cost recovery. It sounds like a good idea. My comment and question on this is related to this request for fee waiver, and that Mr. Thomas seems to be in support of. I know this is taking place in Copperopolis, which is nice. I know it brings tax dollars to District 5, and I'm definitely not opposed to that. The question I have, though, is I was asked to advocate for a public measure regarding CCWD on July 14th, Wednesday, in regards to the Dolly Cassidy water project. And I spoke with members of the CCWD administrative staff, and they told me that the county had offered zero assistance in the way of fee reduction or waivers for that project to help it to be more affordable for the citizens that live in Rancho Calaveras that are part of that Dolly Cassidy water project that CCWD is doing. They said that the county could possibly come up with ways to help reduce or waive based on people's need if they were Social Security, income only, elderly people, etc. And I advocated for that. And Mr. Thomas's response in the July 16th Calaveras Enterprise newspaper was that, quote, "We do not make special deals. Everybody has to pay the same." So if Mr. Thomas was speaking for the board when he made that statement to the Calaveras Enterprise.
That's a separate issue, Mr. Spellman.
It's separate, but not.
That is a separate issue. We have those requests frequently as it relates to public projects and how they're paid for, and we review them on a periodic basis. This has to do with something very specific. So, I mean, we don't have a problem with if you want to address that during public comment, or because we do review that, and we review it project by project. But before us today, it has to do with events versus, I understand what you're talking about, but that's
it is an event
another
versus a project. You're correct in that, and I understand that. But the bottom line is it's whether or not to reduce or waive fees that the county charges. And Mr. Thomas's statement is that there will be no reductions or waives, that all pay the same. So I would ask the board to take that into consideration when you think about waiving or reducing the fees for this event. If it has more...
Lewis. 25 fine.
Buying lunch for everybody now.
Yeah. Thank you. Just a reminder, please, that cells are to be off or on vibrate. Thank you.
Mine is now off.
Or you can give them to me and I will hold them till the end of the board meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Spellman. Could you please
My
go
apologies.
It's okay.
It is off now.
It's okay. So the wind-up on that is that I would ask the board members to consider, even though it is an event versus a project, again, it's still a matter of fee waiver or reduction for services or fees charged by the county. And I would submit to you that it's my opinion, and I will state that here, that people who are on fixed incomes that live in Rancho Calaveras are no less deserving of a fee waiver or reduction than a bicycle event in Copperopolis. So I would ask you to take that into consideration when you vote on whether or not to waive or reduce the fee on this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spellman.
I would like to jump into this a little bit. Mr. Spellman is bringing up this allegation that the county hasn't done anything or isn't willing to do anything to assist the folks over on DeLee and Cassidy. I would like to point out...
That is not the topic before us, so Mr. Thomas, I'll give you just a short courtesy. Mr. Spellman brought it up.
Okay. The fact of the matter is I spent about an hour and a half with Public Works and CCWD discussing what the county can do to minimize the costs for the inspections. And that's literally the only county involvement in that project is just oversight on the construction. So we are going to do our part to minimize the costs on that. This is like comparing apples and oranges, Mr. Spellman, with all due respect.
Thank you. Is there
Mr.
someone
Shoemake.
else? Mr. Shoemake, please.
Good morning. Listen to everyone's comments. I have a couple of my own here.
Could you just please introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm Lee Shoemake from Top Sport. I'm the promoter of the race. I'm not sure where to start here. A couple things. Going back to the initial permit process that started in December for the first race, and I mentioned this last time I spoke here a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly when it was. I wasn't informed that I could add additional events to my application until 3 months into the process. If I'd have been informed of that in December initially, that's not in the application anywhere. I would have added this event to that application. I wouldn't be here today. I was informed 3 or 4 weeks before the first event that I could do that, but at that point I was concerned I was going to get that permit in time for the event that I was already committed to. So I had to just cancel that whole process and just hope I could get the first permit in time for that event, since I was already had people committed to coming to that event. And that's another question I have about this process. I do these races in Tuolumne County also, and I submit the application, and I have a permit in hand in 2 weeks. It cost me $350. It takes them 1 week. They email all the agencies that need to be involved in this. We all sit down at a table. In 20 minutes, we look at a map, we discuss everything. I walk out with a permit. We're done. It took me 4 months to get this permit the first time, and I was concerned I wasn't going to get it at all. So that's my first point I wanted to make as far as this additional fee. Had something else to say on that. Just a second. Oh, the other part of this becoming a historical event after 3 years, you have to ask yourself if you want to bring these events into the county in the first place, because I don't know if any of you have ever promoted an event, but it's hard to get these things going and cover costs initially. So when you hit promoters with this huge fee the first year, you may not even be aware of how many people just decide not to come and do an event here because of that fee. They probably just see that. I mean, I almost did that myself when I saw the fee. If I hadn't been committed in other areas to the cycling community to do the event, I probably wouldn't. I would have just canceled it. I think you also have to, you're discussing figuring out how much this costs and really breaking that down. But on the other side, you have to break it down what this is bringing to the community as far as tax dollars, revenue. I know we sold out all the bungalows at Saddle Creek, and the hotel was very happy, and food and restaurants and all of this. And that's all going to go away if we can't somehow make this affordable. I mean, these bike events don't bring in a huge amount of money. I mean, this permit fee right here just about uses up all the entry fees right there. I mean, and there's insurance costs, there's officials, there's bathroom, there's all kinds of costs on top of this that you just can't carry this. And to have a straight fee for every event, treat everything equally, it's just not going to work that way. I went through the process of contacting all the promoters in Northern California and Nevada that do these events in other counties. And that's where I got my list of fees that I submitted to the county. These are actual fees. This didn't include any having to have sheriff or CHP or anything out there controlling the roads, because some races need that, some don't. The races I'm doing here, because of the way the courses are, we don't need to have any CHP out here. So I didn't think that was directly associated with the cost. There are other counties that charge significantly more, like you bring up Amador County, but there's no races in Amador County. And you can probably guess why. It's because of that permit fee. If it is that high, I had $625. I didn't know the other one. Maybe I was wrong on that one. But I called the county on that one. I didn't get that one directly from another promoter. I heard from other promoters that they told me, yeah, they're aware of counties that do charge these kind of fees, and that's why they don't do their events there. So you have to decide, do you want these events in the area or not? I think that's what I've come up with for now. The main thing is I wish I had just been told, or this was in the application when I initially applied, that I could add this event.
So are you adding more events to your current application?
Not for this year, no.
Well, you didn't know about it on the first application, but you found out after it was submitted but before the event. And now you're submitting a second application, so you're only going to do one event, or are you adding more events to the same application?
No. For this second application, it's just going to be this one event.
So why not add more events? So then you get to your 3, and then there is no charge.
Well, because the way the Cycling Association works in California, you can't just add events anytime you want. There's a whole process of getting that approved, and if other promoters have races, you can't just add. So that's the process right now. It's too far into the year. You can't add any more races onto the schedule.
Okay, so Mr. White, if he has an event that he knows he's going to do next year, but date uncertain, can that be added in?
Not very easily. The permit for this event was already issued, for one thing, because it's happening this weekend.
Okay, but
so that opportunity is lost. But I mean, typically what we'd like to do is have pretty exact information about these events and when they're going to occur and how many cyclists might be involved and all of the other particulars. So to have sort of a placeholder for an event that might happen next year is kind of difficult for us because we wouldn't know what we're really analyzing. But certainly, rolling the tape back, I mean, and I'm sorry that he didn't understand that there was the ability to add additional events, but our code isn't explicit in this way either. Actually, we've stretched that to fit. We've allowed that in circumstances where people have indicated to us that they had multiple events planned in one year. The code itself does not necessarily cover that territory. So we, too, are trying to reduce some of the cost for people when we know that there are multiple events. But in this case, maybe we didn't. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
George, wait a minute. I want to pursue that a little bit, if I may. I mean, what you're saying is for the 3-year event, or the event over 3 years, to then be waived thereafter, that on the first application they have to list all 3 events?
Well, it's not 3 events. It's the same event 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, we're talking about two different.
We're talking about 2 different things.
Yeah.
What I think Mr. Shoemake would have preferred to have happened was that he would have had a whole roster of events that he had planned for this year be on one administrative use permit. And presumably, if he had the same roster next year, that would be the second year.
Well,
the following year
does
would be
he
the third
have
year.
more than one event that requires an administrative use permit in this county in a year's time?
He's done two different ones.
This is his
this
second
year.
one.
Yeah. Well, actually,
This year?
technically
This
one
year?
this year and one last year because it was in
Yeah,
December.
but not within the same year.
Right, that's right. Was it March?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
this
there
is
were
the
two
second
this year
within
then.
this year.
Two
And
years-
that's
two
the
this
subject, at least part of the subject
Well,
of
to
the
have
appeal.
the 3-year,
Waiver.
3 events, do they have to be in the same year? Can they be in
No, in fact,
subsequent
they aren't in the
cannot.
same year. It's
Okay.
3 consecutive years of the same event. You know, for example, not using the cycling race, say Irish Days, whatever it is.
Okay.
If they hold the Irish Days 3 years in a row, they would
Okay.
not have
In
to
other
pay a
words,
fee
you could hold
after
the
that.
same event
Right.
3 times in the same year. That will only count as a 1-year towards the 3 years?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. If you wanted to hold the same event in 1 year, maybe it would constitute 3 use permits in a row. I'm not sure. But the way it's written, it says 3 consecutive years.
Okay, well,
So we'd have to
it says
interpret
3
that.
consecutive years.
Yeah.
That even if you don't put it on the application, if you do it for 3 consecutive years, it should be recognized as 3 consecutive years. I don't understand why you're having to put something on an application the first year in order to meet the requirements of the code.
Well, it's not in the code, actually. I mean, it's
Okay, well,
part of the fee
for myself,
structure.
I mean, I would say
Yeah.
that if he does it 3 consecutive years, then he's done it 3 consecutive years, and it should be waived thereafter.
That's right. That's how we would apply that. That's correct. 3
Okay,
consecutive
and I
years.
guess the question is if he does it 3 times in 1 year, or twice in 1 year, and then again next year, does that
Yeah.
count as 3 consecutive
Well,
years?
I guess technically no, because it's not in 3 consecutive years.
Okay.
That's all I could answer. I mean, again, we haven't been presented with that. Put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think he should apply. I think the events he has, and whether they were, we should just apply what the rule says.
But, Tom,
Yes,
sorry.
Steve wants to.
I had a question for Lee, if that's all right. When we put this, I guess it's an ordinance forward, we thought that the sunsetting would be an advantage. And we see a number of other counties that go on forever. So the total cost, if you were to make a commitment to a county and go over and over again, would generally be more in almost any other county in the end, if this was a long-term project. Do you not see that as an incentive to stay on, which was its intent? I'm curious what you make of that.
Well, I think there's 2 different issues that you guys were just discussing. There's the historical event, which is I paid the $2,000 for 3 years and it's free after that. Okay, that I was told is written somewhere in some documentation. I was never
Same
given
ordinance.
that. The other issue is that you can add multiple events to the same permit, but the fee stays the same. Okay, that's the part I wasn't told about.
Yes, no, I understand that.
Okay,
I'm
I
asking you a
understand.
whole different thing.
Right, I
which is
understand what you're saying.
We've got different approaches in different counties. There's one that has $650 a year in perpetuity. We ourselves have a larger figure for 3 years and then nothing. And I'm curious.
Right. I just wanted to address that because that was being discussed beforehand. So if it was clear in the application that I could add 10 events to the same permit for no additional cost, which logically doesn't make any sense to me if we're basing this on what it costs the county to do all the work, right, on multiple levels here. But the problem with it takes these events time to develop so they can cover costs. So would I prefer to pay $200 a year forever? Yes, I would, because I can then cover the cost of that from the beginning, not have to lose money for a few years, and try to keep something, try to keep a business in business for 3 years losing money so that maybe you can make, some money down the road. I mean, it's hard to do that. I think you're keeping people from putting on these events because of that. So there's multiple issues there, but the main one is if that was in the application, that I could add this event to the first application, then I would have done that, and I wouldn't be paying for the second one this time.
Is that because it's in the same year?
Yeah.
Okay, obviously you can't go beyond the same year, the same fiscal year.
I was told I'm assuming it's 12 months, because this isn't written. This is like an unwritten rule, I guess, in the county, that I can add as many events to one permit as I want. It's still one fee.
Is that accurate?
It's an interpretation, really. Right, there were 3 events in the original permit, 3 individual events, and then 1 additional event in the second permit. But I guess my point is the code doesn't say we can have multiple events on one permit. We've interpreted it that way to help people if we know they're going to have multiple events in 1 year. Now whether, at some point we might...
Do you define 1 year as 1 calendar year or 1 what?
Probably a calendar year if I was pressed on that point.
Okay.
But I guess my point being is eventually you'll reach a threshold where beyond which, if it's 100 events in a year, we're really hurting ourselves, because the cost to analyze and provide comments and all the different departments involved for 100 events in 1 year is going to bleed us dry. So there has to be a limit there too. We've tried to stretch it to fit. I think at some point that we would reach our limit there too. Again, one option to deal with this in a very straight and direct way is to try to recover the actual costs of processing the application. That's something you can go to, and you can be guaranteed that it will recover those costs. Right now, as
just time and material.
Time and materials, but as was pointed out, I mean, there's a word of caution there too. There's costs now that we incur, the sheriff and county council, that we don't recover at all. Those alone, in some cases, may be more than the fee we charge now.
If he had come in and when he took out his first permit for the March event and it requested also a permit for a end of July event,
we would have added that in. That's right.
And it would have been the $2,033
for all of the permits. That's
and
correct.
This particular event would have no fee under that circumstance.
Of course. Yeah. At that point, it would have been reviewed at one time, and
all 4 events, right?
And the review process has to be now duplicated because it wasn't reviewed for 2 events. Is that what you're saying?
Duplicated to some extent, but as Russ pointed out, there's some efficiencies there too, because we've just done it.
Right.
It's a similar event.
Well, I think in the application we need to make it very clear that if you have more events within 1 calendar year, you need to list them all at one time, or you will be paying an additional.
Well, and I'd probably be an advocate if we were going to go that route to establish some sort of overall limit in 1 year as well.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I think we'd be hurting ourselves.
But Mr. Shoemaker said he couldn't do that because you have to go through the cycling or whatever association.
No, I think what he said was he wasn't aware that he could have added all of these events onto the 1 permit. I think that's what he said.
1 calendar year.
I thought I asked the question,
right,
and you said no, you can't because there's a process you have to go through.
I can do that if I know in advance. Say, end of this year, okay, our cycling schedule comes out in December. I have to have all these dates set by that date. I couldn't do it now. I can't add another 2 races onto this permit for later in the year because our schedule is already set. So for next year, knowing this process, I can take advantage of that for next year, but that doesn't help me for this weekend. I'm having to pay another $2,000 for this permit. And the other thing, I was made aware of that rule, but it was so close to needing the permit for the first race, and I did the math. I said, well, it took them 3+ months to get to this point on this application. If I try to add this other race on here, which I initially did add it in, they're never going to get this done for this first race. So I had to just tell them, never mind on that. Let's just get the first one done. Okay, that's the process I was
Mr. Tuffanelli, you had...
I think he answered.
And you see, I mean...
Very thorough in his answer.
No offense, but even, I'm not sure what department, Public Works or
Planning.
something. I mean, he's not even sure of the process, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to understand this. But I'm the one that's paying for it. Another $2,000. So it's a little frustrating. And I also wanted to address the sheriff. I understand, the cleanup and all that, and I know that does happen, but as far as I'm aware, nothing happened at my previous event. I mean, I scoured the course, drove the course multiple times, picked up every piece of trash, whether it was mine or not, because I don't want that happening. I don't want there to be added costs for my events next year. I don't want the public to be impacted. It does me no good to have the neighborhood mad that I made a mess. So,
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Shoemaker, I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit about your experience in Tuolumne County. You talked about the fact that when you are proposing to do an event, that they assemble the affected parties in a room and you go through it and you leave with your permit.
mm-hmm.
How difficult is it to arrange that meeting?
I contact the person in the planning department. She sends out an email, and a lot of the departments don't even show because they know it's a bike race. It has nothing to do with them. So it's like the sheriff may show there's like 2 or 3 people that know that it's going to affect what they do. We have a big map. We work out the traffic plan, and we're done. Okay. And I don't have to pay for the permit until they actually hand it to me. That's the other thing here is I'm not guaranteed a permit, but I've already paid the money. I wrote the check months ago.
Okay, well, getting back to the absence of information that's on the application, would I take it that you would be suggesting that we modify the permit so that there's a narrative at the top of the permit that says, be aware that if you're contemplating multiple events, that you should let us know early on.
And I think the historical information should be in there also, because that's not in the actual permit application. I don't know where that's at, but I was told it's somewhere else on some other piece of paper. I don't know how to find that. So, but that's affecting me less today. It's the other part of not being able to add this to my previous application.
You done?
Yeah.
Mr. Shoemaker, I have a question pertaining to Tuolumne County. You're saying that this year you put on an event in Tuolumne County,
mm-hmm.
and the only fee that you paid was $350. There was no other associated fees to that. You put your event on. There was no bill coming in afterwards?
Not a dime. Took about, I'd say a total, filling out the application plus the meeting, hour of my time. Everyone else's. That was about it.
Thank you.
So that's all I have. Thanks.
If you're having the event this weekend, I mean, it's common knowledge that I was there at last March's race. There were 250 applicants or so, participants. How many are you expecting this time?
I said, it takes time, and with this kind of race, people tend to sign up a little later. I'm hoping around 200. Okay. But over the years, these things, like the one we did in March, I could see that one 500-600 people in the next year or two coming to that. And I think if we're going to break down, like I said earlier, what it costs to process this permit, then we also need to somehow calculate the advantage the county is getting from all the other income. Right? It's like you're getting from both ends on that, in my opinion. Not to mention what it brings to the community and the awareness of the area.